luxury. Although, to be fair, it more or less has become that way in America when their prices went up as well after their interesting economic decisions. I'll leave that there. But if fast food, which is generally speaking food made cheaply, if fast food brands are somewhat of a luxury now, at least to some parts of the population, then what is actually left to be affordable? And yes, of course, cooking from home is more affordable. First of all, not every single parent has enough time, case in point, to do so. And again, even if you wanted to cook healthier, what's the cheapest things to buy to cook? Well, carbs, potatoes, rice, macaroni, spaghetti. Vegetables are a little bit pricier, depending on the season and the fluctuations of prices. Where's trade and industry, where's agriculture to have strategies to get these things affordable for the entire population, not just for the wealthy, because the wealthy generally are going for a better variety in their diet. The lower income earners are a bit more restricted, and it's impacting their health. And then you get your high cost of public health care, as you so lament, Mr. Prime Minister. But unfortunately, a society is a combination of systems that come together, whether we like it or not, to produce whatever the output is. And this is what it is. If you want to have a vision for the future, you cannot have a vision in piecemeal. You have to actually consider that the various aspects of society will impact each other and have to come together in order to ensure we have an outcome for all of society that will be a positive one. Unfortunately, that type of thinking does not necessarily help winning elections, so the government, to be somewhat fair to them, is also not incentivized to care about that. And only the voters could provide sufficient incentive for that sort of thinking. All right, with that out of the way, let's kick off today's Daily Review. So, we have now finally got to see what has been proposed with regard to the Constitutional Reform Committee, what it is they're suggesting. The long and short is, and it's pointed out in the daily newspapers, people do not want power concentrated. So the ideas of an executive president has been thrown out based on who this committee consulted with. Things like restricting terms in office, restricting the number of ministers. I think they were even looking to reverse the process to select a police commissioner, which on the surface seems wrong because it's putting, to some extent, it's taking power away from Parliament, putting it back into the veto position of the Prime Minister. But at a practical level, I do see the point where the current process is not actually necessarily making things more transparent. It's not actually divesting power away from the Prime Minister. It potentially is a political tool to smear people. I will acknowledge that that can happen, although the caveat is I believe that the Police Service Commission will put up the name, the Prime Minister could veto it. He has to give a reason why. Hopefully that reason, part of the reform, if adopted, would be public, assuming this is not something he had to do in the past. And in doing so, there would still be some amount of transparency with regards to how this process was done. That is to say, why did he veto? Technically speaking, if he doesn't veto, well then he doesn't have much to say, or she. But there are a couple of things that I think is missing from this. Oh, there's also looking to try to make the president more transparent, and the proposals, there are two. One is to allow the people to vote, and parties cannot nominate candidates for the president, or the presidential candidates can't have political affiliation, something to that effect. I do wonder how effective that will be, because technically speaking, at least if it's at the same time as national elections, well, in theory, whoever is popular enough to win national elections, if a candidate is somehow linked to them, that's going to be the person, right? Can they endorse a candidate even though they can't nominate one? I mean, how do you ensure that the nomination process is completely closed to the political parties so that they can't do so? And the other one, I believe, is to increase the electoral college. There's also a recommendation to increase the Senate, to have the Senate be proportional representation, which is something that was discussed on this channel, on this show already, which I think is a fair idea to adopt. It'll include 10 independents and 5 Tobago senators appointed by the president. I think that's an interesting idea, and at least for now, I think I would agree, or I would like to see something like that. I have lamented that Tobago doesn't have enough representation in Parliament, and the Senate, not necessarily, I didn't come up with this idea or solution. I wasn't thinking about this. But I did think that the Senate probably would have been the best place to try to rectify the situation, not necessarily the House, because that's based on population size. But there's still going to be a president and a prime minister. What has not been said, I haven't found it, because there are a lot of articles this morning on it, at least in 2 daily newspapers. Will there be a separation from the executive and the legislature? Is the prime minister going to have to be an MP still? Are ministers going to be selected from MPs and senators? I think there's part of the proposal is to limit that. But I don't want it to be limited. I want it to be more or less completely removed. Completely removed. And that would speak to divesting power from the prime minister, because he also does not vote in the House. So of course there's then more complexities as to regards to the role of cabinet and the prime minister with regards to proposing new legislature, because they won't automatically be MPs, but obviously some legislature will be proposals by the executive put forward to Parliament to vote on, both houses. Some might come, or probably should come, from the members of Parliament themselves when they have specific issues that need to be addressed. How that will be done, of course, cabinet has to have the overall policy agenda of a government, etc., etc. All that could be worked out. I'm sure there's examples to look at. But that's one of the things where if we don't do it, I personally will be disappointed, and I feel we will be missing an opportunity and not fully correcting the flaws of our system of government. Also, I think the Reform Committee's proposals, to some degree, is based on the assumption that the service commissions are working. I don't know if I could agree. Right now, High Court Judge Frank C. Prasad, he has, with one case dealing with, I believe it might be an assistant teacher or someone basically waiting to be interviewed for extraordinary 7-year delay. Basically, the High Court judge said that the Teaching Service Commission is in need of reform. And there's already questions about the Police Service Commission, although I have heard at least one person speak out with regards to the head or the chairman of that commission being someone who they respect and is objective. Okay, all right, sure. Not necessarily seeing the results of effective work coming out of that commission, but to some extent, based on the results of how the appointments of commissioners of police have gone in the last couple of years, that commission, it's very difficult for me to present a reasonable argument to the public that it's independent. So the whole basis or the whole philosophy behind some of the things the people consulted want to be done, the public society wants divestment of power, but if the service commissions, if there's nothing to try to ensure more so than what we have, because what we have I don't think is working, at least not well enough, to ensure that they are both independent and capable of operating effectively. I don't know, because that second part, they're operating effectively, that is to be fair to those in charge, a conundrum of governments the world over. How do you get public servants, government officials, to actually work reasonably well? Not kill themselves to try to get things done, move heaven and earth for every little thing, but just work reasonably well. How do you do it? Because you have to compromise between making it easy to get rid of people that are not working out, that are not performing the tasks that is assigned to them, but making it hard for political persecution. New elections, so everybody is dismissed and we replace you with all our people. How do you balance those two needs? I'm not entirely sure myself. I'm not an HR professional and I've never been in public service. So, last thing, there's also a proposal to, I think, increase the avenues to remove independent officials like the Auditor General. The Auditor General is an example specifically named. I don't know if that was based on the newspaper doing so, the author of the story, or if that was done from the consultation itself. That I question. It just brings up questions. The DPP, the Auditor General, I'm pretty sure no one in society is saying, oh, we need better avenues to get rid of these office holders if they are acting in a way detrimental to the office, detrimental to society. Because right now, I would hazard a guess that the Minister of Finance would love to sell us a story that the Auditor General was doing something detrimental to society. But I have yet to find an objective expert in any technical field to tell me that the Auditor General was wrong in what she did. Or at the very least, be able to explain fully the behavior of the Minister of Finance in that scenario and how the Minister of Finance behavior was more or less completely justified. I've yet to hear that. The Attorney General does not count. His opinion on the matter just does not count. He has not offered any sort of reasonable explanation himself. All right, so with that said, it'll be interesting to see what comes out of it. At the end of the day, as much as I say I might be disappointed, I have to be practical, and truth be told, drastic steps are risky to take just in their nature. So perhaps trying to overreach, trying to do too much too soon, trying to push too much change would not be practical, would not be healthy for the political and social environment of the country. So if we could just get some of these things done, in theory it would be an improvement, and I would hope that could be so. All right. Switching gears, I don't know if you were there in Port of Spain yesterday to witness the flooding, but I would just like to make a quick observation. So yesterday, we have a news report in today's papers. Yesterday, Port of Spain flooded. Paralyzed. I mean, I was driving through town, coming out of work, going through Port of Spain to go east as the heaviest parts of that rain was falling. It was incredible to see how quick, because the rain, to me at least, it now came and town was already, Port of Spain was already flooded. Now, early in the week, we have other headlines of floods, not in the same place. It's almost as though anywhere can flood at any time. We have one report from 2 days ago, floodwaters in Penal. One report from 3 days ago, Caroni to Barataria flooded out. One report from 3 days ago again, east-west corridor. So we have going south, we have going east, we have in the northwest. I mean, I guess we should be thankful that the road in Miaro did not get destroyed all over again before it even got fixed. Now, this is before the rains that we saw yesterday, but just to point out again, and I think the keeping up with the reporting has educated me with regards to the long-term average. I don't know if it's like each day would have a certain reading in the long-term average, because there will be fluctuations day to day of water. The Tobago Reservoir seems to still be doing the best. It has gotten closer to the long-term average, let's just put it that way. Meanwhile, the Arena, Navet, and Hollis reservoirs, not looking so hot. Not looking so hot still. We're talking, in some cases, less than half, or maybe a little over half of the long-term average. Navet Reservoir, better than half, but still. And my point is, once again, we live in a country where we could have multiple parts of the country flood in a week. And yet, we have long-term water supply issues. Now, that's an oversimplification, to be clear. It's not going to be that easy to translate those floodwaters into reservoirs. We'll have to add a lot to the infrastructure. Do not get me wrong. But to some extent, while an oversimplification, there's some practical, brutal truth in the fact that we are flooding while our water reserves are low. At the end of the day, no matter how hard the task is, I don't think the task is impossible. And if we had vision and long-term planning, it could have been done. But technically speaking, vision is only good for PR. Long-term planning does not win elections. So to use a previously used phrase, if you want to incentivize long-term planning, then it's the voters to give the government incentives with regards to how they vote. But we like short-term gain in this country, as many populations do. Don't get me wrong. All right, let's move on to the next story. This one is kind of rough because I do think this father is going through a lot. Of course, there was the report of the 6 suspects killed on Wednesday. 2 of those suspects are brothers, Sunil John, and he had some unfortunate things to say. Now, he did go on to say that to his belief, his son never killed nobody, at least one of them. But he went on to say, sometimes a parent doesn't know what their child in and not in. All parents, we just be in the dark until whatsoever come about. Because when your child come home, they love in. They're nice. There's a certain way. And when they step outside, you know, he said he had no choice but to accept their debts. We just have to live with it and keep going forward. Right? Because he is of the belief that the police didn't have to kill the 6 of them. But he said he's not angry. He just wished things turned out differently. Right? He's not sharing blame for anybody but parents. Not that he's blaming parents, but he's just saying, parents, keep a little closer eye on your children. And I find this to be quite a mature and appreciated stance, I guess. I don't know how else, but the words are not coming to mind this morning. In that he's not looking to blame the police. Oh God, you didn't have to do that, and it's your fault, and they killed my boy. And he's just acknowledging the fact that, look, most likely they might have been involved in something that got them in that position. He's not saying that it was fair for them to be killed or not. He's not even questioning that. He's just saying, parents, don't just fall for the facade of what you see when you're around them. You need to know what they're doing. Be more engaged. Communicate. And don't turn a blind eye. Oh, they're fine, they're making money, they're surviving, I don't need to worry about them. No. Now, I think one of the things coming out of this, just to be brief, the fact that most of the suspects were so young, although to some extent it's not surprising given the ages of who's being engaged in criminal activity and the fact that most of them apparently, and this is not a recent development, this is a long-term thing, this has been happening for quite some time, they do not have expectations to live very long. They don't. And perhaps that is part of their motivation to fight back against the police at the drop of a hat, possibly without any actual provocation from the police, any sort of indication of violence from the police. To be fair, though, the community around has been shocked, and they're not accustomed to having crime. It has caused them now to have to rethink. It has hit them with reality. In one case, one of the members of the community in the area was speaking to the press. It has now caused them to have to rethink their own safety. But at the end of the day, they don't have any sympathy. And I could understand people of the population who don't. But I just want to, again, frame the situation by saying it's not that the father is asking you to have sympathy for him and his boys. Although I do, because I understand the choices of his sons, he emotionally is paying part of it. And I would have preferred if he didn't have to. He himself wishes he didn't have to. But the main point that he's making is pertinent. And I think it just goes to show that, look, we might not expect it to happen to us. You might not expect it to happen to you. You're not a criminal. Your children are not going to be criminals, right? And then you take your eye off of them, and all of a sudden they're involved in the wrong crowd. And the thing about it is, some of those 6, they might have just been associates. They might not have actually done any crimes, but because they're involved in the wrong crowd, wrong place, wrong time, some of their associates shoot at the police shoot back into a house, stray bullets hit, and that could be the result. And the father is not saying, woe is me, pity me. The father is saying, hey, the rest of y'all, don't put yourself in a position to go through what I did. This isn't going to necessarily ensure that you don't go through what I did, but do your best. Give yourself a fighting chance with your children. Just want to hit one last story. There are other stories that I want to get but don't have the time. This week, just to quickly point out, Neil Balai, the kiss delivery driver, who was killed after the accident. The images, the video went viral in TNT. I don't always see what goes viral locally, but I did see this myself. The soldier has been charged. He's been granted bail, $150,000. I just have one thing to point out. The incident happened in March. We're in August. There's video of his personal car. As far as I'm aware, this suspect, listen, I'm not saying he's guilty. We haven't reached that point. He's been charged. He's been brought before the courts. Why did it take 5 months? If it was not an obvious suspect, if it was someone the police had to spend time digging, I can understand. But you basically got the guy you got the guy before a judge who everybody thought was the culprit. That, same week? I'm not saying it needed to be done the next day, but why 5 months? And maybe there is a technical explanation, and I would like to hear it. Because, yes, it's the obvious suspect is the low-hanging fruit, but at the end of the day, the roads led there. So what was the point of the delay? I don't understand. Was there mountains of information that need to be sifted through? Because the news reports basically had soldier driving car, hit truck, man died. I could have understood a week's delay, but even then, one could argue you could have made an arrest and charged in a week. Again, an arrest and charges do not mean guilt. We don't have to convict him within a week. Okay, he has bail now. Then how long again is it going to be until this trial actually happens? And maybe it's not the police and your, well, it took some time to actually get him in police custody, I'm fairly sure, for other unconventional regions given its status. But then why did it take so long to actually get this part of the trial process? I don't get it. Be prepared for an overburdened criminal justice system, even more than before, because we don't have the capacity, and it's doubtful that we can generate or build the capacity to deal with the amount of criminals. Many of them might actually be repeat offenders, but still, the scope of the amount of cases that we're going to have to deal with, if we successfully actually apprehend most of these criminals, it's doubtful we could ever get to that capacity. The problem, I guess the implication is the problem has gotten that far out of control. And that's not necessarily something that your government wants you to consider, because they just need you to understand that your government is working somehow. You might not see it ever, but it's working for you, right? Let's take a break, and when we come back, we switch gears. Stay tuned. This is Talking About WSN. We'll be right back after this. Take some time for yourself or spend some time with the family at Sandy Point Village Hotel. Enjoy our various studio and suite apartments, self-contained with their own kitchenettes and Wi-Fi. We also have our famous 100-foot swimming pool and our beachfront restaurant, the Steak and Lobster Grill. And our location in Crown Point puts us near the center of activity, from the nylon pool to the local nightlife. Call us and make your reservations at 639-8533, 389-2378, or email us at sandypointvillagehotel@gmail.com.
FanZone, your reliable, authentic supplier, has just gotten better. You can now visit our website www.fanzonett.com for your authentic wear and collectibles. The only place where you can use both your Visa debit and credit cards. Visit our website fanzonett.com to make your purchase today.
Transform your home with PCU Plus. From stylish furniture to the latest appliances, we have everything you need to create your perfect space. At PCU Plus, we offer fair prices and affordable financing options that are cheaper than hire purchase agreements. With convenient locations in San Fernando, Tobago, Arima, and our lifestyle showroom in Barataria, you're never far from the best deals. Visit PCU Plus today and discover why we're the top choice for quality furniture and appliances. PCU Plus. Quality you trust, prices you'll love. Visit one of our locations or find us online to start transforming your home today.
Knowing how to tell authentic is as easy as 1, 2, 3. Find it, match it, search it. Step 1. Find the style number on the tag. Step 2. Match the style number inside the jersey with the number on the tag. Step 3. Search it. A quick Google search of the style number will verify the jersey is authentic when the search results match the jersey being searched. Don't be fooled by counterfeit jerseys. Before you buy, remember to find it, match it, search it.
FanZone, 2 locations nationwide. Center City Mall, Chaguanas, and Movietown, Port of Spain. Nationwide delivery available.
We are tackling the hard-hitting topics, some controversial topics, some topics we sweep under the rug. You don't always have to forgive in a relationship for it to move forward.
If it is you are in a situation where you forgive the person, but to the detriment of yourself, what are you really doing?
It is very uncommon for somebody in the younger age group to have dementia.
Atheists don't not believe.
Is that I can't disprove God, but you also can't prove God. So we kind of at a stalemate.
We'll focus on the woman who's being the victim,
Right.
or the man who's being the victim. We exclude the children.
Folks are trying to study the underlying brain mechanism to figure out how does this particular disorder happen in the brain? How is the brain processing this?
Don't worry about AI. Worry about humans working with AI.
Are you willing to learn new skills to stay relevant for the future job market? That's the challenge that people are going to struggle with.
And we're back here on Talking Point on WASN, and I want to switch gears. Late last week, I think, or the second half of last week, I made an observation where I feel as though we don't have heroes like what we used to have. Because in the past, we had heroes, and even if they were somewhat retired, they were still alive to speak to us, to impart their wisdom, their experience, to inspire us. And in some cases, in some fields, they still are. In some cases, it seems as though we remember fondly all of the people who helped build our society yesteryear when they're gone. When they're gone, they get some recognition one last time, but the main point is they're no longer there to provide that insight, to help provide guidance, to give us advice, and hopefully we'll take it or not. They're no longer available to help contribute to society. And I find as though more and more it seems as though we don't really have a good replacement system. And I say that very rhetorically. It's not like there'll literally be a factory of replacement heroes, but rather the various aspects, whether it's leadership in politics, business, sport, arts and entertainment. We are standing on the shoulders of giants, but then we are not necessarily prepared to do the same for the next generation. Or at least we haven't identified who these people are. And to have this conversation with me, arts and culture contributor Mark Anthony Peter, host of Breakthrough as well.
Good morning, Sean. Good morning, Trinidad and Tobago.
Yes, I've heard you've been recognized on the street now.
I have.
Yes,
I have.
yes.
Shout out to all of those people.
now, Mark, of course, your main field is arts and entertainment, but ironically, and to some extent, and you could correct me if I'm wrong, and I'm not saying that they're perfect, but a lot of our long-standing institutions were to some extent made by a small minority or singular people, right? Or the efforts of a singular person. Of course, Love Movement, Bernard Scott, to some extent the Lydians with Pat Bishop. Marionettes has their musical director, Greta Taylor, right? Of course, UE's chorale is Mr. Murray. I remember, and the reason why I bring this up is I remember with QRC Scouts program, they had a band. They used to do a concert at the end of every year. The Scoutmaster, Lawrence, I can't remember his full name. I apologize to his family and friends and to QRC and to the Scouts. But he was also involved, I believe, with the youth orchestra. And when he passed away, it was almost like if that void, because he did so much for music and for scouting. And I assume he was a teacher in QRC as well. But just for music in QRC and in the nation and for scouting, he did so much. That void, it was almost like if there was no way to replace it, right? And I fear that a lot of what we have is unfortunately built on individuals who again are not so easily replaced.
Okay. So first of all, so you touched on quite a couple of things. One, we need to understand how we define heroes, right? Do we define them as, are there those people in our personal lives who go above and beyond, and many people may not know about them? Are they those well-known people, or are they the national heroes, like the athletes and stuff like that? And I know there's a conversation about sports right now. So that's one. Two, with all of the examples with most of the examples that you called, for me it has a lot to do with what's being done, but really and truly where it's being done. You called QRC.
Well, that was way back in the day.
Right. We have Lydian's marionettes. A lot of those came developed out of competitions and music festivals with bishops and St. Mary's and stuff like that, right? My question is enough being done everywhere, right? So it's not to say that there are no heroes at all. It's just maybe there are some not in the spaces, in certain spaces. I will say, this National Steel Pan Month, it's still National Steel Pan Month, people. And the 11th of August was National Steel Pan Day. With all of these steel bands, think of where steel band started from. Steel band they were the people who engaged in steel band playing. They were considered, that's where the term bad Johns came out from, right? They were considered those people in society that your parents would say don't associate with. And now we've reached a level where it has developed, and people from all parts of society engage in steel band. Right?
Internationally.
Internationally as well.
People come in.
Yes, exactly.
To play in the bands.
Exactly. So you have your heroes inside of there, your section leaders, your band arrangers, your band leaders, and just the average member, those mentors training the younger ones. I think part of the issue is, I don't think part of the issue is if there's replacement. I think part of the issue is, and I've seen this, the person let's say the person starts up the organization and stuff like that, they get into it, and they do great positive work. I'm not sure. The only thing is, my only question is it being continued by the people that they have taught?
Right.
Right? Is it being continued in a sense where people recognize, oh, this person made a very good contribution to society, I've learned from them personally, am I carrying what I've learned to them, or am I just taking everything that they've learned and kept it to myself? Right? That may happen, that may not happen. But for me, I know I have personal heroes in my life. Mr. Murray is one of them, in terms of, career. Somebody that I look up to in terms of how he carries himself, how he treats with rehearsals in the professional environment and stuff like that. I have these people in my life who I consider second mothers. One of them passed, coming up a year in October this year. But I'm taking her lessons with me throughout my life. And you have heroes, you have different heroes for different things. You may not have that one person where it's like, they are the be all and end all, they are the one person that you look up to. Like I said, if I may look up to Mr. Murray for one thing, like professionally, and then I may look up to somebody else for other parts of my life, So yeah, but coming back to the main point, I think it depends on not what is happening only, but where it's happening, and is it happening in all of these spaces, all of the corners of Trinidad and Tobago?
Well, I mean, it makes me wonder. Because one could argue some people, what we might consider as heroes, the scale of their efforts might not be as grand as others. Mm-hmm. And whereas in the past, it was easier for that to be at the forefront. Oh, you're a band leader, you're a choir leader, you're a sportsman, mm-hmm. right? I mean, Atabola mainly won bronze, I believe, right? Mm-hmm. He didn't win gold, but still he was, at a time when we didn't have a lot of Olympic medals coming in, right, yeah. And he was, at the end of the day, and silver. And at the end of the day, it wasn't gold. Casey Crawford got that for us, but it was still, you know, something to be celebrated, right? And the scale of things, like, I do wonder now that our society has grown, it's almost like if it's overtaken the practices that we have throughout society, and it's easy to be lost in the shuffle. But then also I do wonder if younger generations now, they're no longer necessarily inspired by people locally. And in some respects, they might not even appreciate what inspiration by mentors or people to look up to even mean. And they might be subconsciously influenced by less than adequate things.
Okay.
At least that's a subjective statement, right? Don't get me wrong. And because of that now, positive role models, particularly local positive role models, because it's to show people not just how to live, but how to live in our country, right? I am very specific, and a very specific example for you. It seems as though those things, like, it's not as a parent, and it might not be as a parent to young people anymore.
It's almost like, correct me if I'm wrong, but it's almost like there's so much happening. Before, because it was such a rarity, because it's so much is happening now, it's almost like the novelty of it is kind of gone. Is that what you're saying?
I guess, I don't know if I'll put it that way, but I think you're more or less along the lines of what I'm saying. Yeah.
I think what's happening is...
Well, it's difficult to identify just because.
Right, okay. I don't think the issue is too many heroes. I think the issue is too many perceived heroes.
Right.
Right? When I say that, I don't mean the people that are doing great work for this country, are doing the work on the ground to keep the society alive and keep society going. I'm talking about, so as a society, we are very distracted with things that do not matter. And I will say, for instance, I will bring up I don't want to say social media, but I want to be specific and say media on the phone, right? It's become a situation where we are so distracted by what's happening in the digital reality, because the digital reality tells us what's happening in the world, sometimes, right? But sometimes we get so caught up in this digital reality that it distracts us from what is actually being present in the physical reality, I think. And especially with younger kids who are basically on the phone all of the time, you know, and I've spoken about this before, the information overload, right, that social media has. When you're just scrolling through Instagram, scrolling through TikTok, you like the videos and you like it, but it's so short, the brain is now trained to just enjoy something in the span of 30 seconds, that we're not able to actually exist in the world and appreciate everything that is happening around us. So what I mean by that is, let's say, so on Instagram you may see one post, and it's very nice inspirational post, right? And then the next time you scroll, it's the same, it's from something similar. And then the next time it's something else. And then you just keep scrolling and scrolling and scrolling. It's almost like you're, what's the word? I want to say like you're almost fast forwarding through life or something like that. You're almost like, you're like rushing some stages of development where you're just taking in everything all of the time. And it's become so distracting to us that sometimes we don't see the people out, like I've seen firsthand people just on their phones, not aware of what's happening around them. Like somebody, I remember I was in a line somewhere, and they literally just came so close and they just reached over me. They were so focused on getting their order in that they didn't realize that I was in front of them, but the entire time they were on this. So there's so much good things happening on the social media. That's what I mean by perceived heroes. And so the real heroes, it's distracting us from what's actually happening in reality.
Yeah, because at the end of the day, you could be inspired by Barack Obama, but to some extent, his life, unless you migrate to the States as a child and become a U.S. citizen and then want to become like his life does not have as much practical lessons as, say, a local hero, right? Steve Jobs, yes, you might look up to him with regards to a business tycoon, but who are the local business tycoons to show you not just, well, if you happen to be there when personal computing was now invented, you too could become a business mogul. But if you don't have that opportunity, how do you do it in Trinidad, trying to find an opportunity in Trinidad? We don't necessarily have as many. And that's the thing, like, I feel as though, and maybe to some extent, I don't know business-wise who society has ever truly held up to as heroes for then business students to say, ooh, that guy, you know? We all know Bill Gates, right? Well, now we know Jeff Bezos, right? But who, you know, they even had a TV show, Shark Tank. It's like, these are investors. This is what they do, blah, 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 blah. Mark Cuban, blah, 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 right? Mark Cuban is very inspiring. When he bought the Dallas Mavericks, he's like, I put my desk in the middle of the sales pen. I had no separation with the other salespeople. I took the same list that I was telling them to go through the list of past season ticket buyers, and I did the grunt work alongside my people. And when you hear somebody, a business tycoon, do that, you're like, that's inspiring. That's how you work. But where's the local example of that? Because you want, I guess you could say, you learn from past experience, and it would be nice to have more, the beginning and the end. I went to this primary school, this secondary school. I think in the past we would say, well, this person went to this school, you know, and this is how someone from that school could then become this. Like, at the end of the day, one of the most proud moments of my life internationally was when I was in Barbados at the ripe old age of 18 or so. We had another choir was performing with us. So they had two representatives come to have dinner with us as we were having dinner, and they were put on my table. And I was able to slightly impress them just because, you know, Atta Bolden and Brian Lara went to my school. And I was like, I mean, you know, at the end of the day, on a practical level, it's not making me smarter, it's not making me better. But technically speaking, they were there. They came back to the school at times. You know, they were an example to follow. You know, it's up to us now to choose if we follow or not. And I don't know if we have that anymore.
You see, I think we have it. I just think we're so distracted by everything else that's not happening. So,
do we overlook it? Are we overlooking it?
Yes.
Because in the arts, we do have people who are internationally successful.
Yes.
Even now.
Yes.
But for one reason or the other, we don't really take it on.
Exactly. Because we are so, like, how, it scares me sometimes how, I'm not sure if inundated is the word, or how absorbed we are with North American culture.
Well, here's the flip side to that. Is it that as a society we have devalued heroes? Because we don't seek out the businessmen, right? Our politicians are more about the bubble of politics than being good examples of politics. Some people have said, and all throughout the history of Talking Point at least, I can't speak beyond that, what kind of example is this for the young people? You want people to obey the rules and the laws, and then you're all going out and making this mess of an example. And then now, arts and sports. And I always say there are parallels, at least in this country, with art and sport and how they're treated. It's not just throw money at and hope the problem goes away. It's also how you spend the money. But I think we have an issue in both with regards to, one, how much resources, and two, how they're being utilized.
Yeah, you made an excellent point of, you know, you always ask people, like, how is this a good example for young people? I think there's also a bit of a shift happening where a lot of us, especially my generation, we are recognizing certain holes in the system. Deficiencies, yeah, where because you look up to somebody. And this is part of the reason why I always ask people what their definition of success was, because when we were young, we thought, at least let me speak for myself. When I was young, I thought fame equals success. I thought being well known equals success. And then as I grew up, I realized, some of the most famous people are actually some of the most miserable and actually some of the most toxic people. So then I had a shift in perspective.
Because trust me, getting more well known, it's not making me feel more successful.
Right? But, and then you realize, then as you grow up, you realize, not everybody is perfect, so you have to, again, readjust again. And then when you get into the workplace or organization or wherever the space is, and you're like, I'm finally getting to work with this person that I've loved for so many years. And then you have insider information. You're in in the castle walls.
You get the inside experience.
Yes, and then you're like, oh. Okay. But, and as hilarious as that is, it breeds mistrust. Because you're showing me one thing or you're telling me one thing, and then behind closed doors you're doing something else, right? You are preaching one thing, and then I'm not saying that everyone has to be perfect. Nobody on this earth is perfect. But what I'm saying is, what we like to see is an effort being made, and an honest effort, right? And it's something that even personally for me, I am still learning. We don't want you saying one thing, and then you do something wrong, and then you just do the old way of doing things, and you just sweep it under the rug, and you just bypass it. We want a sense of accountability. We want a sense of you recognizing where you fell short, and then you're saying, making a promise or making a decision to do a little bit better, right? We are not going to hate you. We're not going to like you less because you made a mistake. And that's one of the things. We're not going to like you less because you made a mistake. We're actually going to appreciate you more because you were honest about it, and you were able to say, you know what, that probably wasn't the best thing for me to do. I acknowledge that this is my decision, this is the consequences of my decision. I'm sorry, and we move on. That in itself has so much more respect for me than just doing something and then not talking about it after, right? There's one thing. Two, in terms of certain organizations, some people may not have proper succession planning, right? And that's something that is always...
Well, that's littered in the business world.
Yeah.
That is essentially any self-made organization by one person.
Yeah.
And I've seen so many examples in small business.
Yeah, yeah. And I think it's a matter of... Now, sometimes, hey, if it stops with you, it stops with you. Like, there's nothing wrong with that. But be honest about it. Like, be open and willing to say, I'm not sure what's going to happen. And then when the people around you are saying the system is not working for this thing, you make a decision. Either try with the people around you, try to make it work and say, you know, you all been doing this enough, you all take it and go. Or you'll say, well, it was a good run.
Yeah, because when someone builds something from scratch, it's a success story. It's a success story for people to learn from. But then also, just the succession planning, the next generation, the transition, that, at least in business, is a success story. That is also something to learn from.
Yeah.
But I think we don't necessarily... Those are the two categories I think that young people in TNT look towards even less than art and sports. And that is business and politics, because they're not engaged. Now, granted, yes, young people in other countries, they might seem very too passionate and a little too foolish about issues, but you know what? Even if I disagree with them, I could still appreciate the fact that they care about something and they're willing to speak about something. Maybe I completely disagree with what they're saying, but to some extent, I do appreciate young people, at least in TNT, that have an opinion on anything.
And
right?
that's another thing, the power, a lot of the power of choice. Being able to make a decision, being able to have an opinion. I think many of us who grew up, and I've seen it with my colleagues, with the children that I teach, when the parent makes a decision for every single thing, and you don't leave room for the child to become a human being, a person, and then when they're out into the real world, then the process that should have started at 10, at 14, you know, the little small decisions. I'm not saying they have to go out and work at the age of 10, but I'm saying let them have some sort of autonomy on the decisions that they make. To make mistakes so that they can learn from the mistakes. And then when they enter into the real world, especially, and I see it in university a lot of the time.
Yes, that is a trend worldwide now.
Yeah, they can't handle it, because being able to make a decision it's like, I don't know, it's impossible for a lot of people, right? So again, how we raise them to with the power of choice.
I think we have to take a break now, but I think one of the observations is it seems as though the current generation of parents, so maybe my parents, your parents, and maybe parents slightly younger than yours, they grew up at times when things were harder, and they didn't want their kids to have to suffer. But I think the unfortunate unintended consequence was the kids are suffering in a different way because they were too sheltered. Right? And to some extent, I was slightly sheltered.
And also, just really quickly, they did not anticipate how quickly the world would change.
Yes,
the world
that's
changed
a good point too. That is very
really
true.
quickly. So
it changed on them. They're like their childhood is not our childhood, and it's not their fault that happened.
Yeah, the world literally did a complete 180 on them, and they're like, oh, this is not what I experienced. So then they're like doubting themselves and stuff, and like the lessons that I teach you, was it enough? And so what do you do when you're scared? You hold on more.
Yeah, and I think at that point then it's difficult for children to find their heroes, right? Yeah. Because to some extent, your hero is someone who inspires you because of something that is part of your makeup, your observation, your personality. You're not always going to adopt your parents' heroes or heroes like your parents' heroes. It's just one of those things. Sometimes a mom who was a girly girl will have a tomboy or a goth daughter, and vice versa, right? We have reached that point in society where a goth girl or a tomboy could grow up and then, they end up with a girly girl. These things just happen. But we'll put a pause, take a break. When we come back, we'll also open the phone lines. Mark Anthony Peters with me, speaking about heroes, maybe the lack thereof, the consequences of not acknowledging or recognizing who they are. But also, you could speak about this and anything else. So when we come back, last chance for the week to have your say. Stay tuned. This is talking about WSND Content Capital. We'll be right back after this.
Transform your home with PCU Plus. From stylish furniture to the latest appliances, we have everything you need to create your perfect space. At PCU Plus, we offer fair prices and affordable financing options that are cheaper than hire purchase agreements. With convenient locations in San Fernando, Tobago, Arima, and our lifestyle showroom in Barataria, you're never far from the best deals. Visit PCU Plus today and discover why we're the top choice for quality furniture and appliances. PCU Plus, quality you trust, prices you'll love. Visit one of our locations or find us online to start transforming your home today.
And we're back here and talk about a WESN. Conversations off air, folks. Conversations off air. Our young people and their education, I do say, Mark, it's something that worries me. Now, the phone lines are open. You could call in and have your say. But I'll just peel back some of what I was telling Mark earlier. Mark is of the opinion that a lot of people, they don't know what to do with themselves, so they get a psychology degree. I also think that a business degree qualifies along the same field in our society. Don't know what to do? Get a business degree. Are they going to be in business? Who knows? Are they going to work in an office? Maybe. But then a business degree does not necessarily help you be an office worker if you don't have aspirations to be in management, aspirations for specific aspects of business.
Yeah. That's always a thing that's
like a bank teller doesn't need a business degree.
No. Unless they have like the end goal to work their way up into something.
Supervisor, manager, HR manager, IT manager, marketing exec, professional, get a marketing degree, and so on and so on.
But the next thing is like they're not given, coming back to the whole choice. They think everything has a deadline. So they think everything should be figured out by a certain age.
To be fair, our education system and society sets them up.
Yes.
In that regard. We have common entrance, so we need to be ready for common entrance by this time.
Yes.
And then we need to pick our subjects in secondary school at this time, so we can be ready for CSEC at that time, so then we could then maybe do Form 6 at that time, and then maybe go to university at that time, and then leave university at a certain time.
Correct.
Right? And whatever the field is, if you have a medical degree, obviously that's pushed back.
Correct.
If you have a business degree, then it's a lot sooner. Most people, ideally, the ambitions one, I say ambitious with quotes because I don't necessarily think it's the right ambitions. Ambitions. They need to be out by 21 or 22 or whatever, right? Not like they actually have not just a goal, but like a desire. Because I feel as though professionally, if you're working towards a goal that you have no desire for, how long could you sustain that? And if you somehow manage to sustain that your whole life, how bitter may you end up at the end of it?
Yeah. Because they're like, I cannot. Because then the goals, or from early, the goals become about somebody else approving what you do. So when you can't make the grades for the SEA, you can't make that SEA deadline, or you can't make the CSEC deadline, or the CAPE deadline, or the university deadline. When you get to, this was the most shocking thing I experienced. When you get to university, the way you are schooled in secondary school is not the same way you're schooled in university. And a lot of university entails being able to literally make your own decisions. I remember one of my lecturers said, you don't need to set a hard test to test a skill, right? And when she said that, I was like, what are you talking about? I've been doing hard tests all my life. That's how they test skills. She said, no. Once you could do it fairly at a medium level, once you could do it at a fairly reasonable level, then you have the skill. You just practice the skill for the more and more, and then you'll be able to do the tougher things. I don't need to set an insanely hard test for y'all to just panic and be like, oh, you're not good, or whatever. And then when, in the case of, again, university, when you're there and you've grown up with everything being on someone else's approval, and then when you get to university, they're like, you have to make the decision. Then they're like,
and then could that be like a side effect of not having a hero who you could not necessarily follow step for step, but pattern parts of your decisions and your journey too? They got out of this school by doing this, so at least I know I could do it. I might not do the same exact thing, but instead we have someone making decisions for you along the way.
But at what age are you talking about? Because children are scheduled to an inch of their lives. They have this extracurricular activity. I'm not saying extracurriculars are bad, but where's the balance?
Well, one of the things that one of the callers lamented this week is the fact that, at least with regards to sports, extra lessons have taken up so much time after school.
Yes, I remember.
Right?
I watched that, yeah.
And one could argue music will go out the window too, because to what extent are school music programs sufficient? So then there's after school, school, extracurricular activities, which might also get pitched out the window depending.
The good thing, I think, what sets music and maybe most art forms apart from the rest of subjects, it's that it's not as metric or not as logical, not as scalar. It has to do with the development of the whole person, their brain, their emotions, their imagination. Yes, their logical thinking as well. Whereas mathematics is very much logic.
Yeah.
English, in the way we teach it, is very logic. Whereas science is very, these are the facts. This is what it is. And where music allows for a little bit more, music and the arts allows for a little bit more creativity, a little bit more exploration, a little bit more, it opens, it allows for people with different learning styles to be involved, whether you're visual, whether you're oral, whether you are kinesthetic, whether you're interpersonal, whether you're intrapersonal, all of those things. It's necessary. It allows for that, whereas the other subjects, at least the way they're taught, in some areas, it's very one way.
I'll be honest, with regards to English, I'm probably one of the worst, academically speaking, English students you will probably ever come across. And technically speaking, my most current concentration is in communication. So take that with what you will. And for CXC, almost all of my subjects were long form written essay subjects. Right. So I don't know how this happened. I am bad at foreign languages, and I am not a good academic when it comes to the English language.
You speak for a living.
I know.
But communication.
Don't ask me to do an English test.
Okay, that's fair. That's fair. But
right?
you found
like I could listen. Obviously, I passed my English test.
Yes,
right.
Yes.
But to say that I, as an academic, could speak about the rules of the language with some degree of authority.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Never. Somehow, I feel like I accidentally just got through all of my
So the
English
things like
courses.
I before E except when after C, you don't.
All of those rules. It's just one of those things with English where, like...
I'll be honest, because I'm a teacher, I only just had to remember the rules.
Okay, so like comb, bomb, those jokes with the pronunciation, the same half a syllable will be different depending on what word it is.
Yeah.
I think for me, language is like that. The one language I know, English, I have learned each one individually for what they are on practice.
Right.
Not on, well, I know some logic to work my way out. At some point, my logic brain failed on math, but it works for like history and
well, then learning a new language should be easy for you because...
No, it's not.
Because English has the most it's the one language that has the most
Yes, but it took a lifetime to learn what I know about English. I don't have another lifetime to learn French.
You're tired.
That's right. Folks, the phone lines are open. I know Fridays.
Exhausted.
Fridays are chill days, and I don't always want to be very serious on a Friday, to be fair. But I was interested in what you said about university students not being prepared. Although I will say this, I remember going back to finish my first degree. There were a lot of people who were in the working world, and they seemed a lot less prepared than some of the young people who were 16, 17, 18 that now joined the journalism, PR, and mass comm courses in Costa's journalism school, who were fresh out of school, who were much more academically capable, much more mature, much more decisive, much more able to communicate, much less likely to say they're going to do one thing and do something else.
Yeah.
Whereas we have people in the working world, and I'm like, how do you function in your job? You cannot even participate in this group project.
Yeah.
I don't know if Gates is to blame with some of it. It made life too easy to be a student. And now the current crop of students, maybe they might get a kind of like a pushback on that.
The different things. I think depends on the lecture that you had at the time. Depends on the courses. It depends on your overall university experience.
Hey, we had the same lecturers. Let's put it that way.
Okay.
When you think about it, right? All of the bad examples in your university life as a student, you had the same lecturers as them.
Yeah, but I listened.
That's besides the point. That's besides the point.
Actually, well, it depends on. Okay, if you and I are in the same room and we experience the same thing, how we interact with it and how we take away from it is ultimately up to our own.
So I understand teaching style, individual preferences. I get that, but let's go further, because you probably experienced them in more than one class with different lecturers, and yet the results are the same. So to what extent is it solely just a matter of style and preference, and to what extent is it there are deficiencies, some of which could be because of consequences of the system and how the system chewed them up and spit them out. And some of it could be they're worthless. But we don't necessarily know in a lot of cases which one is which.
True. That's okay, sure. Yes. That could be true. That could be true. I think I'm gonna keep coming back to this point. It all depends on are you able to make certain decisions? Are you able to make certain mental decisions? Are you able to be like attentive. Like throughout this entire school is out. Throughout this entire vacation, I've been trying as best as possible to be very relaxed, because as a teacher, you kind of have to be attentive all of the time. And then it's only when like something just randomly fell out my hand, I was like, oh wait, I have to be attentive again. Okay, so let me slowly work the brain back up. So I'm making that mental decision to be attentive in my daily life.
I don't know, but you tell me. Is it that for the most part, kids don't really like play, physically come together to play anymore? Because from what I've seen, there's a lot of, I'll line with my friends online.
Yeah. Yes and no. It depends on where you're talking about. Also, the way we used to play, it's not safe anymore, unfortunately.
It's just that, like, trying to think of all the different ways where older generations, when they were children, what was different for them than for our generation, my generation, your generation, the upcoming generations. One is could be, way back in the day. Life was harsher, and you in some societies you could have been a grandfather by 30, and that's why marriageable age in the past was so much younger, because you needed to try and get the next generation out before one or the other passed away from a whole host of reasons, right? And kids had to grow up quick, in part because the parents needed help, in part because, the work was that demanding, and in part because life was so unforgiving. If you weren't capable at a younger age, you might end up, being a statistic, because half of the kids didn't make it to adulthood.
Yeah. Well, part of the thing...
What we consider adulthood.
Yeah. Well, part of the thing for me is we thought that the problems could go away. We thought that we could get to a life where life has no problems, has no challenges. We were wrong. And now we are dealing with the consequences of younger generations growing up being like, I thought life was supposed to be good. Meanwhile,
yes.
But it's
if
hard.
I do this.
Exactly.
They told me to do this, and life is good, and it's not
exactly.
good.
And then inside, you're like, all my trust in the people who told me to follow these steps is a little bit shattered, because the outcome is not what you thought, what you painted it for me. But then, as a young person, I have to realize the world, as I may mention before, the world changed very quickly. Yes. And because we operated from a place of, let's get rid of problems, we forgot that life would always have problems. They would just manifest itself differently. Yes, comparatively, people who grew up, so like my parents, my grandparents, life was hard. Yes, it was. Life was hard. They had their own challenges to work out. But we also have our own unique challenges that Gen X and boomers do not understand.
Yeah.
Right? And the world is changing so quickly. Gen Z has problems that millennials don't understand. Right? So we kind of set ourselves up for a little bit of failure. And that is why there's a lot of rebellion, because we were told this, but life happened in a way that we did not know, that nobody could have thought would happen.
Let's take two different perspectives or two different subsectors of society and what society's problems are, and jam them together. Because I think what a lot of people will be, they'll be tempted to basically say, oh, well, these young people, all they have are psychological problems, right? Back in my day, we was like worried about what to eat or whatever. Because to some extent, it's not like there's a physical wall stopping you from getting a job and earning money, right? But the problems are a bit more subtle. The money isn't going as far, right? The education system is not progressing in the way, it's not directing you to something that could then easily get you a job. So some of it is not necessarily mental in the sense of, you're crazy or you're emotional, but it's not a physical
it's harder to see. It's harder
to see. It's intangible. Maybe that's the better way to put it.
It's intangible.
But the flip side to that is we have tangible consequences currently in society that we're facing. Yes. We have a crime level that's gone out of control. And I think, and I mentioned it for the first time today, but I'm starting to wonder if there's truth in this. Crime has reached to a scale that the criminal justice system literally will never keep up with. Like, we physically cannot have enough judges and courts and police officers to literally deal with the sheer number of cases that have to be dealt with, the sheer number of investigations and arrests. It has gotten that out of control. Because at some point, you can't just increase the police force. Like, it gets impractical the bigger it gets, economies of scale, a whole host of reasons, right? The point is, the problem is not just, ooh, it's bigger. No, I'm thinking it's reached the point where it is so far out of control. Like, we need to shrink it just so that we could properly manage it sustainably, right? Mm-hmm. From the point where it's shrunken enough. Mm-hmm. And I'm wondering if some of what you said there, where we thought we will remove all the problems. Oh, we free primary, free secondary, now GATE. Yeah, education for all and things get easier, but we didn't necessarily figure out things fully. And I'm wondering how much of the country is actually literate, how much of the country is actually so poor they cannot eat, and obviously we have a crime problem.
Yes, we do have a crime problem. You made the point. Some of the problems that we're experiencing is not tangible, but the consequences are very tangible. Yes, somebody might say, you know, I had real problems. I didn't know what I was going to eat if food was going to be on the table. Well, I can't cross the road without having a panic attack. I cannot make a decision without having...
This is not you. This is a rhetorical person.
Sure. I can't make a decision without having some sort of anxiety. I don't like some of the adults that are around me, and I don't know why. Because nobody taught me that trust is something that is very, very important. Speaking of trust, I was on Talking Point, I think it probably may have been the last time I was on. We asked the question, how did Trinidad change after 1990?
Yeah.
And I am of the firm belief that, I remember one of the callers said, they handled it badly, the aftermath of it.
Yes.
They cleaned it up badly.
Yes.
And I think that sowed a huge mistrust in the law enforcement system.
Yeah. Well, is it mistrust in the sense of we don't trust them to do the right thing, or mistrust in the sense of they can't handle it? Because
yes.
I would argue it's the latter, right?
Both.
Because to me, it's like, let's enforce all our laws and we'll redouble our efforts, but you bungle that. Yeah. Which was fairly obvious. You cannot be more obvious. Well, these people, they did a coup. Whatever they're guilty of, it's obvious they're guilty of it.
Yeah.
And there was no consequence for it.
Because we underestimate how things affect us. The thing itself happened, all right? The coup happened. But there is work that still needs to be done on a law level, on a mental level, on an emotional level as a society and as individuals to kind of work through it. The reason I had asked the question on that day about it is because I remember I was watching a show and somebody said since, oh my gosh, it was an American show. Somebody said since September 11th, we've been on red alert. We've walked the streets asking ourselves what's going to happen next,
right.
Especially people who live in New York.
Yeah.
Right? And that was something that shifted how America deals with terrorism, how they, because soon after that, everybody was getting a pat down at
yeah, of course, yeah.
at the airport. Everybody had to go through the scanners, and then there was the debates of, whoa, why are you looking at me through an X-ray scanner, whatever, right? So many things happened because of it. And then that sowed the racial discrimination where people didn't trust people who wore
certain
people of a certain race who wore certain clothing.
For better ways, that is human history. Something happens And these are the perpetrators, so all of a sudden, people that look like them are mistrusted, you know, to varying degrees.
The reason the pattern is showing up in history is because we are repeating the same pattern. And we are not learning that we need to deal with certain things a little bit differently.
Although I will wonder this, because the whole premise of what went wrong with the coup was they offered them amnesty to whatever degree it was,
right,
to the point where essentially there was no real consequence for it. And there's a part of me that's like, in what major crime will the DPP offer such a deal to the main perpetrators involved? Right? In what jurisdiction, for what major crime does this happen? Right? Because to some extent, like, I don't know if I've ever seen, if we started to give murderers amnesty for just confessing and surrendering, well, I want to say that the public would riot, but this is TNT. We don't protest for almost anything now. We half the country could literally be underwater, and we still won't, like, demand any change. That's what it seems like.
You know, when I realized, I made a point earlier, you know, when I realized that,
but we have a caller from Mova on the line. Good morning, caller. You're on the air.
Try to remember that point.
Good morning, Sean.
Morning, morning.
I have to say that is a fundamental and profound opinion that you all just shared about the aftermath of the coup. That really, really is the spot. The other thing is not just the failure of the security services, but the court system. I always say that judgment that was handed down by our High Court was the biggest failure of justice to the people of this country. I've always said it, you know. And just let me, on a different point, I don't know if you all can find out who is responsible when a vehicle is abandoned on the roadway. And I'm raising this because over a month now, there's an old vehicle, an old model Peugeot. It's abandoned on the side of the highway, Total Highway, heading east, just before the junction to Golden Grove. And when I say just before, I mean just before the turn-off. But the thing is, it's on the shoulder, yes. But it's at an angle where the back of the vehicle is sort of sticking out. And it has been there for weeks, and police vehicles are passing there all the time. I wonder if you all can look into that. Thank you. Have a good day.
Thank you, caller.
I know what car he's talking about.
Now, the police are saying if there's an abandoned vehicle reported, but I don't know, sometimes those vehicles could be abandoned after being used in a crime, right? I would hazard a guess the disposal of a abandoned vehicle, if it's on or near a roadway, probably that would be state land and not necessarily on private land. If a vehicle is abandoned on private land, that would be the owner to deal with, right? If it's on public land, like the roadways, the sidewalks, the shoulders, or whatever, that would either be the central government, because I think they might have jurisdiction over the highways, or the local government. I'm not entirely sure on that, but that would be a government thing. To some extent, you could, in theory, you could go to your MP's constituency office. But in practical reality, I'm not entirely sure if they will acknowledge, because it's not even if it is part of their official job function or not. Since it's up in the air, one would hope that the duly appointed elected representative, so in a similar vein, the local councillor for the area, right, the local government representative, go to them to try to get, you know, even if it's not their responsibility, their office should look to try to find out whose responsibility it is, because then there's also the caveat that maybe this specific piece of land might have some special technical rules about it, special ownership, who actually owns it. You know, this section of the road might have a jurisdiction because of some special reason. The point is,
just call the MP office. Or wouldn't that be regional corporation as well?
Or the regional corporation, or both, right? That is, I hesitate because I think Works and Transport is responsible for maintenance of the highways. Now, you see, this is where, ironically, semantics comes into play. Removing and abandoned vehicles, that maintenance.
Well, yes, because the shoulder needs to stay free.
Right. But then also, depending, it might be a good idea to call the police about it because this could be an abandoned vehicle that was used in the commission of a crime. Do I expect that all police officers who take this call will most likely look into it? No, I don't expect all police officers to. Some would, some probably won't, but I hate to say this, but to some extent, it behooves the members of the public to be proactive in this situation.
The point, that I wanted to make before the caller, how I know we set ourselves up, come back to the point, how people behave during the pandemic.
Yeah.
All of our distractions went away, and it created new problems.
You mean the tight confines of not being able to escape?
Exactly, yes. And we would see these things on Facebook as a joke, but they're real. Like, I'm sending, like, I remember seeing a post, I'm sending my husband to get items in the grocery one by one because I've never lived with him in the house for so long.
Do you know, as all children who have lived with their parents for a time, there are times when, you would butt heads. But ironically, the time when we were most at peace was during the pandemic.
Really?
Yes.
Wow. I know that was the flip for a lot of people.
Actually, it did not. Just the everyday aggravation of my rhythm is not necessarily in line with your rhythm. For us, that did not happen.
Everyone's
in the pandemic.
rhythm. Okay.
I
guess.
Because you know what I think it was too, because everybody had to slow down regardless. It's not necessarily, at least this is personal, but this is my theory. I don't think for us it is that we just naturally have different rhythms, but because of the work that we have to do, we are caught up in other external rhythms, and the pandemic allowed us to just kind of not have to simmer down. We don't have to worry about the outside influences.
Okay.
So for us, that was fine.
Now, you all dealt with that in a very healthy way. Other people, on the other hand, did not.
Yeah.
People were forced to slow down, and people don't know how to slow down. All right?
Well, no. I think the giveaway is the line where she said, I don't know him, I don't know how to live with him, so I'm sending him out one by one. Yeah. Like, you married the guy. you are husband and wife. There is not but anything more intimate than that. That's more intimate than parent and child.
Yeah. And then also how we dealt, on a more serious note, there was a protest during the pandemic. I can't remember what it was, unfortunately.
No, the candlelight vigil, just before it got locked down again.
There was a protest in Savannah. Queen's Park, Savannah, in front of President's house, I believe. And there was like tear gas and stuff like that.
Oh, I can't remember what I was for, but yes. But there were a series of peaceful protests after the death of Andrea Barrett and the other girl.
Yes, I remember that.
Which, when Easter of that year came up, the commissioner said, no, you can't, which was convenient, but I could not reasonably say that I had good reason that was a politically motivated and not a practical decision. We have to wrap up because we have a show coming up. But yes, but what I lament is that was the last protest that I saw in this country. Basically, that and whatever I think the tear gas might have been a union issue, but regardless, that period when we were willing to protest, it's almost like if we follow the Americans protesting, and then when they stop, we stop, because we don't know how to have an original idea of our own.
But then my question is, how inundated are we with North American culture?
Too much. Folks, that is Mark Anthony Peter. We want to thank our caller for calling in. Interesting opinion there on the coup and the fallouts. And yes, I like you agree with us. I suspect we can't necessarily disagree with you either. It's unfortunate how it happened. Mark, thanks for joining me.
Thank you for being here.
It was a good conversation. I do enjoy it here as we kind of shift gears. Folks, this is Talking on WESN. Of course, 10 Questions with Andy Johnson is coming up at 10. So in the meantime, I'll just remind you to remember your allegiance to the Republic and to each other. Make today and this weekend a good day, as my colleague Mr. Shaw always says, and stay safe out there.
And tune in to Breakthrough on Mondays.
Tune in to Breakthroughs on Mondays. And of course, I do believe we'll have a repeat later today. 10 Questions is coming up soon. We'll see you next week. Bye-bye.
WESN
The home of Caribbean content is growing, and we welcome you to be a part of the #1 platform for young personalities who are driven to make a positive impact in society. As we continue to reach every corner of Trinidad and Tobago through our daily broadcasts, our social media pages, or through our 75+ digital billboards across the nation, contact us to learn about our competitive rates via marketing at wesncc.com or call us at 628-5835. WESN Content Capital, television with a difference. FanZone, your reliable, authentic supplier, has just gotten better. You can now visit our website www.fanzonett.com for your authentic wear and collectibles. The only place where you can use both your Visa debit and credit cards. Visit our website fanzonett.com to make your purchase today.
Take some time for yourself or spend some time with the family at Sandy Point Village Hotel. Enjoy our various studio and suite apartments, self-contained with their own kitchenettes and Wi-Fi. We also have our famous 100-foot swimming pool and our beachfront restaurant, the Steak and Lobster Grill. And our location in Crown Point puts us near the center of activity, from the nylon pool to the local nightlife. Call us and make your reservations at 639-8533, 389-2378, or email us at sandypointvillagehotel@gmail.com.
Young at heart, purpose-driven, patriot even. When you like to party, but are still passionate about discussing important issues, the only place where your needs will be met is WESN Content Capital.
Issues that can be tabled, discussed, and agreed upon by them, and also try to tell them the reasons why I feel FGM must end. Unlike the others who just depend on what is written on the papers, They go to these communities, mess up, and at the end of the day, communities feel like we are just mocking their culture. And I want to tell you today that FGM is not a cultural practice. It's just a control over women and girls' sexuality.
So as you suggested there, Sadia, FGM is, of course, seen as a form of violence against women and children. It can cause serious, deadly health consequences for women later in life. So my question now is for you, Dr. Ahmed. What is preventing this practice, in your view, from being eradicated completely?
Thank you. I'd like to first acknowledge that February 6th is the International Day for FGM Elimination. And this theme for this year is about people like Sadia. It's about FGM survivors. Her voice matters, and it's a call to action through their voices and to invest in survivor-led movements. FGM, as you said, Erin, is a global human rights abuse and a crisis that could lead to severe health complications, but it's not an easy area to tackle for several reasons. First of all, it's a deeply entrenched social norm that is handed down by generations that are about beliefs that are not easy to change, and they're often linked to positive values like purity, cleanliness. Secondly, the beliefs around this practice vary, and they're many. From them, such as the right to passage, to womanhood, or a way to maintain family honor by reducing the sexual desire so that the girl remains a virgin before marriage and, maintain fidelity during marriage. And thirdly, there is a need for many players to be involved to eradicate female genital mutilation, and we have not invested enough to end it.
It still remains the case that less than 2% of donor funding of the money goes to local activists. This is according to the global media campaign to end FGM. So maybe, Dr. Ahmed, you can speak to why has it been so difficult to reduce reliance on this top-down institutional approach?
We are working with over 11,000 activist-led organizations globally, but there is a need to invest more. It's really a question of finance availability. But I also wanted to add, Erin, that we cannot ignore other effective interventions like social marketing, media, involvement of religious leaders, cultural leaders, health workers and service delivery points who are part of larger institutions, ministries of health, ministries of social welfare, who can put these interventions to scale at a national level. So there is also a need to invest in larger institutions too.
Well, we're going to take a look quickly at what is happening on the ground in one of the countries where FGM happens. Now, 80% of FGM procedures, again, are performed on the African continent, where paradoxically, laws against the practice are the most common. Kenya is one of 28 countries on the continent where it is illegal, though so-called medicalized FGM is reversing decades of progress, as you'll see in this report by Alison Sargent.
Young girls between the ages of 7 and 11 sing songs and rhymes urging their parents to save them from FGM. It's part of an alternative rite of passage ceremony organized by a local nonprofit in Kenya's Kisii County. While Kenya banned female genital mutilation in 2011, the practice persists, particularly in Kisii, where 80% of the time it's carried out by healthcare workers.
In Kisii, because of the complexity, because of the medicalization and the secrecy, and our parents really feel like they know what they are doing, it's very complex in Kisii.
Doris Kamunto Onsomu no longer does the procedure, but spent years performing it on young girls in medical establishments. At the time, she believed it to be a safer way of preserving the cultural custom that she herself went through as a teenager.
One reason was that if you were uncircumcised, they felt that you would be sexually active unnecessarily, and so it's like when you are circumcised, like they reduce the libido a bit. Yeah, that was one of the major reasons.
But even when FGM is carried out in a sterilized environment, there are still major risks to the girl's physical, psychological, and sexual health. I went through the cut, but I wouldn't want my children to have to go through the same thing. At a seminar I attended, we were taught about the complications women who were cut had when giving birth. I experienced the same thing when I went to the hospital to give birth. UNICEF warns that the increase in medicalized FGM could ruin the progress Kenya has made in stopping the practice. According to Kenyan authorities, FGM rates fell to just 15% in 2022, but NGOs say the real figure could be much higher.
Well, as we saw in that report, then FGM is technically illegal in Kenya, but it does still happen. Now, one of the things that the UN Population Fund has been focused on in recent years, if I'm not mistaken, is developing better anti-FGM laws that are more aligned with human rights. Dr. Ahmed, is addressing things like medical FGM or other loopholes a part of that push?
It is indeed. We have learned a lot over the several decades and working in several countries. So we have seen a lot of good practices, and we are trying to strengthen the anti-FGM, trying to strengthen the human rights perspective. In fact, we've just published a guidance, and it's available on our website, that helps policymakers, lawmakers, when designing or revising their laws, to learn from other good practices, to identify the loopholes that they could tighten up some more and address aspects around areas like radicalization or even the law itself. And this guidance also emphasizes the need to invest into enforcement, because often laws are made, but they are not enforced.
Now, the rise, this question is for both of you, the rise of post-colonial studies, I think, has also affected the discourse around ways to eradicate FGM. I'm curious to know what you both think of the criticism. Do you think that efforts thus far, especially top-down institutional efforts, have been ethnocentric? Have they been victimizing? And is this something that you try to integrate in your work? I'll start with you, Dr. Ahmed.
I just wanted to share a study that was done in 15 countries, and it found in these FGM prevalent countries that women are often in there are couples that where a man does not believe in FGM continuation, but the woman does. And in such sort of couples, like what we call discordant couples, the mother is the decisive factor for the daughter to undergo FGM. So really the power lays in the hands of the mothers at